Shame is perhaps one of the most important patterns for our culture to address, and it rings out loudly in this dynamic as a central theme to focus and address, not only for us as individuals, but most importantly for any public nonprofit seeking to facilitate love and well-being in public interest. I want to begin by acknowledging that this is just the beginning of a shame healing process, that transparency and secret telling, etc., is the first step. But what's going on here in this project is not the healing of shame, it's giving it back. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. The domains of shame, or dimensions of shame, let's look at that first. The first is the message, and this is the most important impact of shame. Shame expresses itself in a variety of abusive behaviors, from parents to children, from husbands to wives, wives to husbands, teachers to students, bullies to victims. Shame expresses itself in a variety of ways. But beneath the behavior, there are a couple of core messages that do, most of the damage. And one of those messages is that you are worthless. And another of the messages is we are more valuable than you are. If you're dumping shame on someone, you may hit them to release frustration. You may rape them to release the feeling of helplessness and hostility. You may humiliate someone and shame them for not knowing something. You may do a variety of things that we would understand as abuse because they're not good use. Abuse is just poor use. You have a best practice or way of going about something. Forcing live coals down someone's mouth isn't it. And so you have the behavior, but beneath that behavior are the messages. You are worthless. You're not as important as I am. Your needs don't matter, i.e., you're not very valuable. Your innate nature is less valuable. Racism is an issue of shame. It's just flat out saying, with no scientific basis or anything, that because you're a woman, because you're black, because you're poor, you are not as valuable as these human beings who are white, who are male, who are rich, who are well-educated, who are powerful. And we're going to behave. So that's, of course, a lie, but we're going to behave consistent with that message. We're going to set up a culture that defers more to this group than to this group, that in 1,000 subtle ways communicates that who you are as a being is not as valuable. And in parental abuse dynamics, one sibling who gets good grades is, of course, more valuable than the other one who doesn't. The boys in many cultures, of course, have to be educated because they're valuable and the women do not. But the reason that the message does most of the harm is that we are integrity creating machines, meaning the brain is seeking integrity with itself and with its environment. Because integration and integrity is strong. Now the problem, and what makes these messages profoundly destructive over a lifetime, is if you seek to integrate to have integrity in your heart, mind, and body with the message and the belief that you as a human being are fundamentally flawed, are the source of everyone's problems, are inadequate, are valueless in any number of dimensions, you will try to kill yourself because that is in integrity with that message. Why should you exist if you are fundamentally a bad person? You will also seek to isolate, and you will keep secrets. Because the part of you that is seeking to live, the fundamental human needs to survive, feel secure, have a sense of love and belonging and esteem, now understand that the only way to live is to keep secrets. What secrets? To protect the shameful truth, or to protect the pattern of behavior through which the message was delivered: you do not matter. You have no value. You are the problem, etc., etc. That isolation makes self-love. The isolation and secrecy makes self-love impossible, because consistent with secrecy is I believe that I'm unlovable. That's why I have to hide this part of the truth. Consistent with the pattern of isolation, again, if anyone really knew who I was, if they saw the full truth of who I am, they would not love me. Why? Because they did not love me. I arrived fully present and dynamic with all my emotions, and everything was here, tons of energy and enthusiasm for life, and it wasn't good enough. It wasn't welcome. It was violated. It was betrayed. It was shamed. Who I am is not lovable. Isolation is consistent with that belief. Secrets are consistent with that belief. And if you look at the design of the cell in the body, and you imagine individual cells in the body getting the message that they are the problem, that they are not wanted, that they will be attacked by the rest of the body, and that they are the cause of everything bad and will never be loved. And you think of the process of isolating and cocooning, which is one of the phenomena behind many of our diseases present. Our cells carry the messages of the shame-based people who dump shame through these messages in us, leaving the conscious and subconscious mind of the individual to seek integrity with that underlying message. The message behind the abuse is the core of shame. And obviously, if you believe you are valueless, you're not going to invest in your education. You're not going to work hard because it's pointless. You're not going to take care of your body in a very real way through obesity, addiction, self-mutilation, self-hatred, and any number of compulsive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We kill off the psyche, we kill off the body of the person, believing the shame-based message handed to them through abuse and violation. The next dimension is exclusion, and we've touched on this, but so we have the message, and then we have exclusion. Exclusion is a trauma, and it is also a shame. It is the trauma of shame. In the hierarchy of human needs, survival, security, love, and belonging are the first three. Without love and belonging in a modern era, you don't have security of survival. But the need is there for love and belonging. When you have shame, it is impossible to love or be loved in that terrain of shame. It is mathematically impossible, because the behavior and the actions in integrity with the beliefs in the message of shame preclude transparency, giving and receiving, loving and being loved, openness. Silence, another form of exclusion, another dimension of secret. Silence, invisibility, is a dimension of shame. This part of me will not be loved by me, by my family, by my community, and by my government. And so though it is inside of me, I am silent about it, rather than experience the visceral reenactment of the shaming and exclusion drama. I am silent is a dimension of shame. Secrets. No, that never happened. No, I fell down the stairs. My dad really loves me. He just beats me to within an inch of my life from time to time. No, he doesn't. I fell off my motorbike. Secrets. Another form of silence that is loyal to the message being delivered within the abuse. Trauma. Trauma is an overwhelming energy pattern that floods the psyche, that floods the self, disorients, overwhelms, renders us incapable of action. When we are traumatized, it is a message of valuelessness, because we do have the resources, we do have the computing power, we do have the technology, we have an entire planet waiting to love us with all kinds of playgrounds and minerals and plants and things, if the cult awareness, if the cult consciousness is willing to express value, if it's willing to say, we're going to use this land to help people, to help you. We're going to use this money and these resources and this time. You're in pain. These resources would help with this pain. Let's see what we can do. Within the function of trauma, and particularly the function of trauma without repair, there is the message, you do not matter. And that message goes incredibly deep, because trauma is one of the most intense human experiences we will ever have. It is an experience of being oversaturated with a message that I may not survive, that I won't survive, that my survival is in jeopardy financially, physically, emotionally, socially. On any dimension, mentally, I may not survive. And in order to get a traumatic message at that magnitude, particularly a message delivered by other human beings, we have to get the simultaneous message that we don't matter, because behind that is a lack of regulation and attunement. I will not attune. I will not regulate these large energies that affect you. I will not attune to your needs. Beneath all sociopathic dissociation, an absence of attunement, is the message, you don't matter. The next dimension is the dimension of scapegoating, where the energy pattern that is co-created by the group, meaning the group sets the probability field. You understand, if you have a country where there's no speed limit and no car checks and no seat belts, the accident rates go way up. That sets the probability field. I'm in Phuket, Thailand at the moment, and it is the motorcycle fatality capital of the world. More deaths die in Phuket, Thailand from motorcycles, I think, than anywhere else in the world. The reason is obvious. No driver's license check, no inspection of the motorbikes, no policing of alcohol, no motorcycle helmets half the time. If you rent motorcycles, you get the cheapest helmet imaginable. You pay $3 a day for a motorbike, so people are incentivized not to take care of them. And people show up from all around the world who are used to driving in different directions, hop on a motorbike, often with no experience, and drive in some of the most hilly and diverse terrain on the planet, where people don't, by the way, in Thailand often ride on the right side of the road. It's very common for, on one lane, people to be driving in multiple directions at different speeds, and you have children and the elderly and all that. So that is a probability field that is created by all of those variables. Children can ride a motorbike. Children can ride without a helmet. Parents send their kids to school. 4 on a bike. 4 on a bike. You know, the 12-year-olds carrying the 6-year-old, the 8. That is a probability field created by the circle. The circle creates the probability field, but the individual experiences the consequences of the probability field. And let's look at some of the probability fields in the United States, that guarantee the dissemination of massive amounts of trauma, emotional, psychological, relational abuse, and shame. Well, in my town, the city has worked out that it costs the taxpayer $40,000 to $60,000 a year to maintain an individual in chronic homelessness. That the PTSD created in 42% of the homeless population, that the policing, that the removal of graffiti, that the ER visits, that the damage to property, that the fires started, that all the different special services creates a bill for the taxpayer of $40,000 to $60,000 a year to maintain an individual in a state of shame and chronic homelessness. So where are all the tiny houses for our homeless? No. We have banned sleeping in their cars. That might mitigate their ability to have PTSD. If I offer a tent to a homeless person in my backyard, I've broken the law. It is against the law to offer aid, emergency aid, for the most basic human needs of survival, security, love, and belonging. We have an epidemic of shame-based abuse systems that make it illegal to render aid. So you have an absolute level of abuse and stupidity in the homeless dimension. You take education. Would it be kind to a teenager to give them some emotional literacy, to help them understand the shame being dumped on them by their parents and their government? Would it be kind to teach teenagers how to be empathic in the dating dynamic? since they're experiencing this for the first time? Would it be kind to teach the dynamics of sexuality, the difference between love, and would it be kind to teach teenagers anything at all that is relevant to daily living? Diet, building a house, relationship skills, meditation, yoga, anything useful? Anything at all? And we say no. Let's teach them algebra. Let's teach them bullying. Let's teach them shame-based education protocols where their needs don't matter and they're graded, where they carry the shame of the system. Because when they don't get good grades as a direct result of the pathological stupidity and cruelty of the education system, the children are asked to carry the shame. You know, when I went to school, and for some reason I couldn't focus on See Cat Run. This was very important for me to learn, See Cat Run. What wasn't important was the teacher dealing with the violence and abuse at home. Now, just imagine an intelligent human being for a moment. And back home, the two deities, God and Goddess, Mom and Dad, are fighting, hurting each other, hurting you, threatening existence, playing abandonment games. And your highly educated teacher is going to say, let's not focus on the urgent traumas of your existence. No. What we'd like you to focus on is a cat running who doesn't even exist. Just little symbols on a blackboard. If you'll do that, that means you're a good boy. Now, if you're worrying about how to live at home, that makes you a bad boy. You see, the cruelty of stupidity foisted upon our young is a systemic, national trauma and abuse dynamic. And we could give a shit about those children. We send our kids off every day. See cat run. See cat run. We're not going to tell you the truth about your parents. We don't want to get involved. We're afraid of the complaints of the abuse parents. We're not afraid of our children being mutilated and then shamed for our cultural inadequacy to deal with the issue. The military, another deep shaming dynamic. If you read Edward Snowden's books, he talks about how the military he volunteered for systematically reduced the bone in his legs to powder in an absolutely inevitable dynamic of pairing the smallest person up with the biggest person in the platoon as a joke. Here's your country. What? Your military is going to help the country survive? Bombing innocent people, committing acts of terror around the world, humiliating and shaming the people who volunteer as good fun? This is an act of barbaric cruelty. And what's stunning is the lack of anger we have towards direct, pathological, sociopathic behavior by our national institutions with our tax money. You too can be an abused child and go into the military and be abused and trained to abuse other people around the world, and trained to keep secrets, and be trained that if you, like Snowden, uphold the Constitution and tell the truth, that you will be the number one enemy of your government for standing up for your country and the people who are obligated. You have, the tax dynamic. Give us your taxes, or we will put you in jail and seize your property. A complete abuse dynamic. The entire framework that we create as a cult has shame and abuse and trauma thickly woven into it. Parental illiteracy. Why should we tell parents how to protect the innocence and vulnerability of a completely helpless human being? Why should we do that? Even an hour in high school, a little bit of parental literacy, 20 minutes? 20 minutes? Here's a soul. Here's a human being. We're going to give you 20 minutes of literacy. No, that's too much. It's too much in an abuse cult. Humiliating a child in school, etc., for being distracted by the traumas at home. Bullying, let's add that in. You seem a little disoriented. You seem a little feminine. Let's hit you. Let's attack you and then give you support? No, let's circle around and watch and laugh at the person who's being traumatized and bullied in an abuse cult. And once you graduate from this abuse regime, how about getting some help at work to recover from a childhood and an education system of severe traumatic abuse, in which not a single grown-up human being put your interests as a child first? That would be nice, wouldn't it? You go to work and people say, how are you? We want to understand, what are the scars that this has left in you? Have you been able to heal any of them? Are you able to be in your body and focus on work given these traumatic loads? No. In a capitalist cult, where the money people create is more important to the cult than the people who create it, the number one mandate that defines work is being professional. Now, being professional, doing stuff for money, could mean anything we want it to mean in a healthy cult. It could mean being kind to people. It could mean listening to their feelings. That's professional, because we care about people and we care about feelings. But no, we've decided, consistent with the pathology to date, to define professional as its number one priority is leave your personal stuff at home. Don't bring your personal stuff to work, i.e., don't exist. Now, how exactly is a rape survivor, single mom with 3 kids from 3 different alcoholic men, with no parental training, with an abusive family history, going to legitimately be cheerful at work? We could give a shit. You be cheerful or you get lost. We are an abuse cult when it comes to work. And not only are we an abuse cult when it comes to work, we then turn around and say, you're going to dedicate your life to making things and buying things, and this will define you in your cult. It's not who you are. It's not your empathy level. This is that what you own, and we're going to deluge you. The public television, the national media is going to deluge you with shame-based messages that say you're worthless if you don't work your ass off at a job 70% of Americans don't like, to get money to buy shit you don't need at elevated prices that have been pushed up there through the intensity of shame-based messages around those products. You should just watch most of the runway things in the fashion industry these days. It's almost as if they pick the most anorexic models that are the most self-disdaining and have no joy on their face, and have them walk around with rubbish. And this is the fashion, which if you don't buy it immediately, you're a shit, just to make sure if you didn't get the message before. And If any part of you rebels against this pathology and transgresses some of the tremendous amounts of inconsistent and cruel laws, oh, you want to get drunk to escape this amount of misery? Well, you do this and this and this, and we'll put you in jail for that. Good job, abuse cult. What about smoke some marijuana? Oh, yes, we're definitely going to lock you up for that, for your own good, of course. And we're not going to let you build inexpensive houses. You could. People in Thailand don't have homelessness. Why not? Their government doesn't interfere with a truly free market system. They stick up a tin hut, suddenly they've got a house. Nobody bothers them. So they're all housed. Not in America. Not in America. No. You try and house yourself. Oh, we've got to get a permit for this and a permit for your own good. For your own good. We're going to jack up the cost of housing 1,000%. For your own good, we're not going to make it legal to sleep in your car. For your own good, of course. We're going to take your tax money and abuse you, creating millions of American homeless and taking many, many more and having them live in threat and terror of shame. What? The shame we have ready for you as a cult. If for some reason you do not survive this obstacle course, you will be poor. Surprise, surprise. And when you are poor, we have a great special message for you. You're worthless. You're not worth helping. Get the fuck out of this business. We don't want you. We want the money that you don't have. So get the fuck out of this space. So this is a cult that we've created together, that we tolerate together. But in a shame abuse cult, we don't take any responsibility for this pathology. We don't demand that teachers actually teach children something useful. We don't bring therapists into school that actually know what they're doing. We don't tell our children the truth, and we certainly don't apologize for them. We make them feel guilty. They ought to be feeling grateful for the chance to be abused on 7 different ways, 6 days a week. But are they grateful? No, the bastards. Let's hit them. Be grateful. Do what your parents say. Or do whatever you want. We don't care. We're an addict. And we're off hedonistically doing something to escape this pain ourselves. So the scapegoating, this is the dimension of scapegoating. The children who are most traumatized are going to get scapegoated at school. The children who are most traumatized are scapegoated at home. The military delivers parents back to their children all the time with states of PTSD who are incredibly cruel to their children. And the military, thankfully, for the military, has special military people that go around and protect the military from exposure at the amount of cruelty dished out to American children within military families. Because we wouldn't want the military to look bad, would we? After consuming 25 times more money than any other country on the planet combined, we wouldn't want them to look bad for indoctrinating their core staff with PTSD for wars we didn't need, that caused trauma and terror in other countries. We wouldn't want them to look bad. So let's cover it up with a special division of the military that goes around and take notes on all the childhood abuse, but doesn't protect the child, that colludes with the guilt of the abusive parent, rather than own up that if our military is going to create pathological psychopaths with PTSD, it damned well better liberate them And that doesn't work, does it? When therapeutic protocols with MDMA are illegal, thanks to the other government, because Nixon wanted to target the blacks and the liberals who happened to be higher users of psychedelic and MDMA and therapeutic drugs. That's why they're Schedule 1, for political reasons that have put millions of American families in jeopardy, in trauma, and behind bars. But this isn't very fun, is it? We have talk show hosts that make little quippy jokes about all this. Isn't it fun? Aren't we mature? Aren't we mature that we can turn on a light-hearted talk show host and poke fun and eat more food and get more fat rather than do anything about it for the next generation or ourselves? But why would we do anything when we're a piece of shit, when we're worthless, when we're the enemy, when we're the reason that our parents weren't happy and they told us in no uncertain terms? Why would we bother? And we don't. And so we have a cult of shame and abuse. But our passivity, our pathology in not telling the truth to ourselves and to others, has real impact. It targets 1 in 7 Americans for a substance addiction. It creates chauvinistic, abusive males who are incredibly violent at the violations that have been done to their psyche since birth. This is not some meaningless. The result of these protocols have very real statistical impact. What we like to do is to protect the abuser, which is the cult and the culture. We protect the abuser of a system that creates these statistics year after year, and we attack the scapegoats, the individuals who find themselves in an abuse dynamic on either the side of the victim or the perpetrator. Both suffer, by the way. Victim and perpetrator and bullying and variety of dynamics both deal with depression, both deal with worthlessness. They both deal with the same thing because they've both got the same disease. The perpetrator had the feeling of worthlessness and powerless and they gave it to someone else. Now their victim has it as well. We don't understand psychological health. And all of this comes back to the chauvinism of elevating the dominating masculine principle over the feminine. Over the feminine principle. Children, in their openness and innocence, are in a yin or feminine state of life, and so we violate them. Poor people are in a place of need, and so we violate them. Females are not as physically strong as males, so we hit them and hurt them. Females are not as financially powerful as men in an abuse cult, and so we abuse females more than we abuse men. But we abuse the feminine in men, homosexuality, tenderness, empathy, sensitivity, and emotions. We abuse the feminine in males mercilessly, just to make sure that every man will be trained to treat that which is feminine as mercilessly as the feminine in them was treated since birth by their parents, by their peers, by their job, by their cult. That's not good enough, though, just to make men into pathological abusers of their own femininity and of women and children. We now need to shame men and blame them for the cult that guarantees their emotional illiteracy, their traumatic illiteracy, their relational illiteracy, and that pathologically and sociopathically attacks their femininity since birth, thus giving a very schizophrenic message to men. Your femininity is worthless. It is something to be ashamed of, to be beaten down, to be made fun of and humiliated. But the femininity in women, oh, that's not to be messed with. That's really valuable. Your femininity is shit. Their femininity is what? Why would it be anything other than shit? We are integrity creating machines. All trauma gets, all shame, which is a trauma, gets passed on, gets given back to the abuser, or is transcended through healing. To transcend and heal something, we need to connect with an energy that is bigger than the wound and bigger than the human ego and bigger than ourselves. Now, our abuse cult has a nice slap in the face ready for that, called materialistic science, that says we have faith. We have faith as scientists. We have faith that there is nothing bigger than human consciousness. Well, we have faith that there is something. Oh, you simpletons, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? Show me something bigger than the species in a test tube. You mean you want me to put something bigger than the whole planet into a test tube that's on a tiny part of the planet? Well, when's the last time you tried to fit a planet into a test tube, let alone a transcendent consciousness? But you have faith. You have faith that nothing is bigger than you. Some rationalist, reductionist, materialistic scientists go even further. Consciousness is an illusion, a random accident, and it's not even real. It's a fantasy. It doesn't even exist. It's just some kind of errant byproduct of natural selection. Now, what's very interesting with the Dawkinses and other people with this whole push on materialism is their message is that you don't matter, consciousness doesn't exist, that there's nothing more, and blah, 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 blah. That it's all pointless. But it's very important that you read my book about how pointless your reality is. It's pointless, but you've got to read my book to understand just how pointless it is, because it is essential that you understand my version of reality, which is an illusion, because my consciousness that wrote this book doesn't even exist. The schizophrenia of this does anything but help connect human beings to a transcendent consciousness that is capable of healing shame and trauma. It binds the cult and the consciousness down into a level of stupidity that is incapable of solving the problem it is creating in its brains and in its species. The intelligence of the consciousness in our cult that creates trauma right and left every day is not capable of resolving the problems that it is creating with such a high level of stupidity. Stupidity creates problems easily, but it doesn't fix them easily. So we're again hammered in so this gives us, good rationalist materialists, the chance to give the shame back or simply pass it on unconsciously. These are the options. So what are some of the directions for moving forward? Because a lot of shame is being dumped by the high facilitator body on the team and on participants through a number of behaviors. Starts with sexual abuse by a high facilitator isn't a high issue. So just send your family to high, where they also can be sexually abused, and it will not be an issue of the very people who commit to the entire world winning. We value ourselves, we don't value you. Now, this message has come in loud and clear by the cult from birth to the present day. We've elected an abuse president to head an abuse cult. Why wouldn't we? And the nice thing is, we're talking about it. I mean, how nice of Trump to be so direct about who he is. It's wonderful. It's a step forward over most presidents who put on a suave veneer as they persist in pathologically abusing their people with their own money. So the directions are truth-telling. 1, how do you heal silence, exclusion, and secrets? By truth-telling. Number 2, empathy for those most in pain. The irony is, again, we live in an abundance paradigm. We have so much land, so much food. We have so much food, we spend our tax money paying farmers to plow food into the ground. We pay them to do this. This is astounding. But we have way more food, way more land, way more energy, way more sunlight, way more everything that we need in technical terms. What we don't have is empathy. We have an abuse cult that stigmatizes and blames and shames those who don't have, and elevates those who have and don't participate in those who don't have from having that equal opportunity. You do not have an equal opportunity born in a slum with black skin in America. You do not have an equal opportunity born female. You do not have an equal opportunity born homosexual. You don't have an equal opportunity being born poor. And rather than have the guts to apologize and the decency to acknowledge this fact, we just keep shaming these people with, you too can do it. It's a free country. It's this and that. This is not a free cult. It's not a free country. I am literally 10 times freer in Thailand, including the freedom to die with a motorcycle if I feel like it. It's not a free cult at all. Try sleeping in your car. Have your tax money come knock on your door and tell you to go nowhere in particular to see if you get woken up by another police officer who gives a shit about your PTSD and well-being, but is going to take your tax money to harass you against all of the data of this great scientific community that we claim to worship, the great scientific deity that we claim. We follow the data, No, you don't. You deliberately ignore the data to cause massive harm and waste vast amounts of money doing the exact opposite of what the data suggests, be it a pharmaceutical company, be it the Human Awareness Institute, going out of its way to cause additional harm with additional money, spending money to make things worse, suing a client to shut the truth down, rather than spending money to bring the truth to its community. Empathy for those most in pain, for the scapegoat asked to carry the incredible burden created by the pathological passivity and hostility of the circle. It's like sending someone to Vegas and saying, place 100 bets with a positive mental attitude and see who comes back winning. You don't do that to someone you care about. You give them a system in which they've got a halfway decent chance of winning. Responsibility for the pattern versus blaming the victim is the response. Now, it's next, after you stop blaming the victim, particularly innocent children and all of that, stop blaming the perpetrators. Yes, they have to be stopped. But with the cult creating new perpetrators every single day with our tax money, it's a bit of a joke to pretend that the power lies in the perpetrator. They're not born that way. This cult turns them in to perpetrators. If you blame the individual for the sins and stupidity of the circle, you don't get any resolution. You may get a release of shame. We've passed the shame from this person to this person. You don't get change. You don't get healing. 4, education. You personally step outside of the stupidity of your cult and study 10 hours of trauma. Study shame. Read some Brené Brown. Read some Robert Bly. Read some John Bradshaw. Do some meditation work to give it back to an energy bigger that's capable of doing something else. It's all energy. It's all energy. Shame and abuse are just energies that are killing us and that we don't have the intelligence to know what to do with. So give it up to an energy, to a consciousness that can do something useful with it. No energy is good or bad innately, but shame and abuse are killing and destroying our lives and our culture. Education, shame. Study abuse, study psychology. Learn relational competency. Do this 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day. And this will have more impact on the culture and on your personal well-being than any number of other things that people gladly spend 3 hours a day on. Watching TV, shame-based dynamics, watching advertisements, this and that. We do it all the time. We spend 3 hours a day doing shit. The self-loathing, the ignorance, and the shame leads us loading up on shit 3 hours a day, not investing in a competent mental emotional future of intelligence. 5, healing. Deal with the shame in your past and give it back to the family system, to the cult that gave it to you. Give it back. Understand how it came into your life like an infection. Give it back. This is not who I want to be as a being. This is who I've become in a chronic, hammered system of abuse. 6, sharing the load. Ask for help. This breaks down shame, by the way. Although if people deny the help, it reaffirms the shame, particularly in abuse cult, because part of chauvinism, part of the hostility towards the feminine, it is feminine to receive. Every polarity breaks down into yin and yang, masculine and feminine. It's not gender-based. Some of the most pathological chauvinists in the culture are women. It's not gender-based. It is feminine to receive. It is feminine to be transparent. It is feminine to ask for help. It is feminine to allow change, to open to something bigger than ourselves. It is feminine to transcend the human ego into something bigger. Ask for help, and in the healthy masculine, offer the help. You hear some kid screaming? Do something about it. What? Well, that's where education comes in. It is astounding to me. I have various departments of government rush out, with all kinds of things. Up! You built a wall higher than 4 feet. We have got to address this. But they drive by, for your own good, of course, they drive by people sleeping under bridges. If they gave a damn about human beings, the priority starts with our homeless, goes to our abused children, goes to our single mothers, deals with our elderly. And if you still have time to go around and fix everyone's problems, start fussing about their houses, please. But this is not what we do. I have clients denied an occupancy permit to their house because their front step is 1 inch off, so they can't live in their own house. I have clients denied an occupancy permit because the drippers in the drip system for the landscape that hasn't been installed have not been spelled out. Are they 0.5 gallon per hour drippers, or are they 1 gallon per hour drippers? We want to know, or you can't move into your house. Oh, and by the way, we're going on vacation, so you'll have to stay in a hotel until we get back to process whether or not the drippers in your drip irrigation system are 0.1 gallon or 0.5 gallons per hour. I mean, this is an absolute pathological joke. And we have money to fund bureaucrats to rush around rescuing us from such tragedies as underwatering our plants, or who knows. I mean, this is pathological stupidity on a humorous and grand scale. Sharing the load, focusing attention, using the law of empathy. What does the law of empathy mean? It means the person in the most pain with the most need gets attention first. That's the law of empathy. The law of empathy leads to integration, healing, and health. The law of violation and sociopathic stupidity leads to increasing violence, endless expense, and disease. Finally, we can come back to ourselves. Educated, participating in change, we can come back to our nature, which is to be loving, which is to collaborate in healthy empathic partners in meeting our human needs to survive, to feel secure, to have a sense of love and belonging, to have a sense of self-esteem, to have a sense of our core talents, to develop those talents, to bring them out into the world, to create abundance with those talents, and to leave a legacy, to do something and connect with something bigger and more complex, something transcendent that is beyond who we are. This This is who we are, lifted free from the many knives stabbed in, from the many angles, the many dimensions of our cult, which are filled with hatred for the essence of who we are, which doesn't fit into the box, that are filled with hatred towards the feminine in men and in women, the empathic, the awareness of the pattern rather than the point, the awareness of the community, not just the individual. Shame is a key metric and a key focal point in this event because the facilitators have embodied the pattern of shame to protect fear, secrets, and ignorance at public expense, at individual and client expense, and have also maintained this superiority dynamic where we're better than the team, so we don't have to be accountable to the same responsibilities and ethics that we hold our team member. The message is one of shame, one of abuse, one of superiority. And it's not coming from the facilitators. It's passing through the facilitators from the cult. But what makes an organization meaningful and special to the extent that it succeeds is not just passing the abuses and inadequacies of the cult onto its clients. It's intercepting those messages with a superior technology. And that's what I'm bringing in these websites, awareness of superior technology that is currently being suppressed rather than embraced and integrated in the Human Awareness Institute.